In the year 2025, a year of really era-defining momentous astrology, March 2025 stands out as the month with really the most twists and turns, astrologically speaking, and is arguably the most active and important month this year. And a month of a lot of important, or in a year of a lot of important months, honestly. We have two eclipses. That is a lot on its own. We have Mercury and Venus retrograde. And we have an outer planet, Neptune, entering a new sign, which is Aries, for the next 14 years. So joining me today to talk about the astrology and also to see what the tarot has to say about this month, let's welcome my good friend, Aster Soluna. Aster, hi, welcome. Aster is a psychic tarot reader. Just don't mind if me interrupting you with your own bio. I'm like, you know what? Let me talk about you for a minute. So Aster is a psychic tarot reader and energy healer who brings in influences of astrology, elemental energy, and channeling spiritual guides to ground and connect you with your multidimensional self. His holistic readings can help you bring balance to your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies while leaving you with actionable next steps to make changes in your life. He specializes in helping people overcome internal conflicts, work through creative blocks, heal their inner child, and begin their journey into shadow work. He welcomes all clients at any stage of their spiritual development because the best time to start is now. Okay, you can talk now. Welcome. Thanks for thanks for being on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. We
Yeah.
always have interesting kikis on our own, so it's exciting to kind of bring this to your audience and mine as well.
Yeah, I was like, let's make an official conversation instead of just iMessaging and DMing back and forth about it. I was like, let's strategize and do something structured. So I'm excited that we're able to do this. So yeah. Okay. And you're really one of my favorite, obviously we're good friends, but you're one of my favorite, like, diviners and readers, and are just like very, very accurate. And it's not just like love and light new agey bullshit. Like it is very to the point. And we've shared so many stories of being in client sessions and just having these kind of extreme details sort of come out in our sessions, and a lot of specificity. And also, we could talk about stuff like Baldur's Gate 3 and hang
it's
out.
a win-win.
So yeah, I was like, I need to. So before we get started talking about these transits, I guess this month is messy, girl. Like,
No, it's giving hot mess.
Yeah.
The only good thing so far, so I do my monthly newsletters. I'll give a little bit of a preview for that. I got the Six of Wands and the the Six of Wands and the King of Cups for the vibe of March, which does seem promising, but also each transit that's coming up kind of is messy. So I feel like overall it'll be really nice at the end of it, and we're going to learn a lot emotionally and internally, but it's going to be kind of gritty and hot mess express until we get there.
Okay, you said Six of Wands and what?
King of Cups.
Oh, okay. Can you kind of explain that before we
Six of Wands gives the energy, like Six of Wands is serving victory. It's serving keeping your head held high, riding in from a heroic journey, and like the people of the village celebrating you for taking out the orcs, like it's like that celebratory victory kind of energy. And then King of Cups
vanquishing the goblin
shows like mastery of emotion, and like just this ability to hold and maintain emotional control regardless of your surroundings. And so I feel like March does offer a sense of finding your stability in this tumultuous time that we find ourselves in. But at the same time, it has to be earned. Six of Wands energy is very earned. It's the actions that you're taking.
So are those cards, do you see those cards as more as like the advice for the month, or like a dominating energy, or like how do you
I feel like with tarot, because it's quantum, it's low-key both. Like it's like advice, but also this is what can be for you if you keep your slow and steady pace, if you keep this kind of like energetic fire burning within you. It's giving, don't lose hope, and you will find emotional mastery at the end of this month.
Got it. Okay. I had some like, I think it was more advice to me when I made some video, like your spiritual practice is really important right now. So you don't like completely
Mm-hmm.
lose your head. I see this very King of Cups energy also, like that
Mm-hmm.
emotional balance and emotional mastery, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And even in my February newsletter, I thought it was funny that both of us aligned on that, where it was,
Yeah.
hey, like spiritual hygiene, like it's important.
Yep. Well, and I think some people took it as like, because some people took it as like, you could just ignore what's going on, ignore the noise. And I'm like, don't ignore it. You
No,
cannot
no.
ignore it because they're literally trying to erase like queer people and are deporting people. Like you can't ignore that shit, but you do
Mm-hmm.
have to keep yourself from completely panicking also, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can't ignore it. Definitely transmute it though.
Yes. Um okay, so let's do a little overview of these of the astrological transits for March, and maybe we'll kind of start talking about each one. So we'll talk about the astrology of those and maybe kind of what you're getting energetically or from the tarot about those and kind of getting that alternate perspective. So first up, we have Venus retrograde. Venus will station retrograde on March 2nd at 10 degrees of Aries and will be retrograde through April 13th, where it will station direct at 24 degrees of Pisces. That's kind of that. It really just looks like I mean, obviously it'll be messy. However, personally, I kind of have fun with the Venus retrograde. You know, we'll talk about that one. Um, Next, we have a total lunar eclipse at 23 degrees of Virgo on March 14th, opposite Saturn and Pisces. And the very next day, or essentially around the same time, we have Mercury stationing retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries, technically on March 15th, and it will go direct on March 31st. So a pretty short Mercury retrograde period, but should really kind of add to this sort of chaotic kind of energy as we look to the energy of the month. 2 weeks later, we have a solar eclipse at 8 degrees of Aries on March 29th. And lastly, we have Neptune, the planet of idealism, oneness, and higher consciousness, but also delusion, illusion, vagueness, obscurity, entering the sign of Aries. So, okay, we have a lot to talk about, especially those degrees of Aries are all really close together. So
Mm-hmm.
the Aries part of your birth chart and also like the Virgo Pisces part of your birth chart is definitely one to watch. We're not going to talk about how that affects each individual like zodiac sign. I'll be doing that in videos on my channel later this month, and you can also follow Aster in his work on his socials. And by the way, before we dive into these, if you're wanting to get a personal birth chart reading or predictive astrology to look at, hey, how these transits like really personally affect me, or to look at your year, or also to get a reading with me, you can book through me on my website, Docstar Oracle. I'll leave the links in the comments as well. And you can book a psychic reading or an energy healing through Aster as well. Just if you're like, hey, I kind of feel drawn to you, definitely check that out. That's how we make our living. So,
Much appreciated.
yep. Also, sometimes we just gotta tell the girlies what's up. So, okay, let's start with Venus retrograde. Any initial thoughts before I just kind of give like a general like overview of the astrology?
Honestly, I'm kind of excited for this one. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's giving the beginning of Lizzo's Tempo, where she's like, "I've been waiting for this one. Turn it up."
That's
Like that's kind of how I feel
that's
about
one of
this
my favorite
transit.
Lizzo songs. I love that song.
Like it is the energy of Holly. It's the energy of the dark feminine, kind of waking up.
Yes.
And really, to me, in tarot, Venus is the Empress and Aries is the Emperor. And so the energetic feeling is like maybe the Empress is visiting her ex-husband's house, and it used to be her house, and he just remodeled like a part of the house that was really important to her, and she kind of has this flip of energy where she's like, what is actually happening? Like, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
And it's almost like she sets herself on like fire. Especially in Aries, like that's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Um, I'm
It's a
really
very
excited to see what this may trigger in our political sphere in regards to the feminine rising and the feminine making their voice heard, especially because of the Mercury stuff later, which we'll get to. But that's kind of my vibe for it is
yeah.
Empress, Emperor, kind of conflicting.
Flashing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's given a battle for sure. Like, I mean, so Venus, the planet of, love, relationships, beauty, art, aesthetics, harmonizing, coming together. Um, and she is going retrograde. So obviously, this is a time when we review our relationships, what we value, anything that we consider to be Venusian, anything like in those spheres. So you may want to look in your birth chart, or where Aries is in your chart, because like Aries is sixth house work and health stuff for me. So I'm probably going to be looking at where I may be dissatisfied. I feel like Venus is can be very dissatisfied,
Yeah.
on a personal level.
So for me, Aries is fourth house. And I was trying to predict what my energies may be like during that time. And do you know that scene in the original Tomb Raider with Laura Croft as Angelina Jolie as Laura Croft? And she's like, I woke up this morning and just hated everything. And there's like gunshots like, all over the library.
That is
That's going to be
funny.
me. Like, I'm going to have to rearrange my house again.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, and it's a very action oriented Venus too. Especially in, the warrior fire sign of Aries. Also, Venus in Aries is interesting because Venus is considered to be in her detriment, meaning that she's in a sign where she has to be unconventional. She has different tools that she doesn't really normally like to use. Venus rules Libra, so the opposite sign would be Aries. Venus does well in Libra because Libra is the harmonizing artistic energy. Aries is like, I can sort and fight my way out of this goblin camp. You know what I mean? That's very so. And lastly, Venus representing women and femme people. And I think queer people is a very Venus and Aries kind of thing, because it's a very unconventional expression and really having to take up the fight. And I think we're seeing that now already as Venus prepares to go retrograde, because there was this huge protest. What happened? There was like a Stonewall something that this current administration like erased like transgender people essentially from like Stonewall's history. Something happened where there was a huge
LGBT
protest
thing.
about it. Yeah. And there was already like a huge protest about that. And I think that is a preview of something that is something to come, which is like Venus people fighting for their rights, whether that's like reproductive health care, queer rights, all this kind of stuff. I feel like images of women and femme people sort of leading resistance things will be very much more in the news, I feel like, during this
I think
period
so
of
as
time.
well. Especially
Yeah.
too, because March is Women's Rights Month, or
Oh,
Women's History Month. Yeah.
I didn't. I guess I forgot about
So
that. That's kind
on top of that, yeah, it's just very apropos for the planets to be doing this. And then with Mercury and Venus essentially going on the most extended date I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Let me just kind of peek at that, because it's very much about like
So
those
check out
two. Oh yeah,
March
now I see
11th
it.
through April 17th. When
Yeah,
Venus and Mercury touch, Mercury also goes retrograde and starts chasing Venus down.
yeah. They're it's very much Mercury and Aries holding up the megaphone to Venus the whole time,
Yeah,
because
no,
Mercury being
exactly. And I was
yeah.
also thinking about Mercury as a representation of like non-binary and gender non-conforming people.
That is very true. Yes.
And so there's definitely an opportunity, which is what I got in tarot too. But right now there's not a lot of organization. So maybe through this podcast, through some social shares, through some friend of a friend talking, we can get something forming. because
Yeah.
the energy is ripe for women and essentially not any non-masculine peoples to gather and march and
Yes.
lead a movement.
I also think Mars going direct is going to have a big impact on that as well, because as of this recording, it's been retrograde since December 6th. And Mars being the planet of action, energy, motivation, the gas in your tank. It's, there's been kind of a struggle bus, like just trying, essentially because Mars being in Cancer, it needs I feel like it needs extra rest, or energy has been sort of up and down. I've talked about this kind of at length, but Mars going direct, I think will be kind of help the energy of pushing back essentially. And not even just politically and globally, but personally, you know what I mean? So I guess, do you have any advice personally for Venus going retrograde this, or maybe just kind of tips or things to expect? I guess maybe more on a personal level, because obviously there's going to be a lot happening globally, but I kind of wonder what do you think personally, or also, did anything come up in the tarot additionally with this transit?
Yeah, regarding this transit, I think I was getting ahead of myself earlier. It is the Four of Cups inverted, which is hey, you are very clearly not seeing an opportunity that's in front of you. And so I feel like the collective is not seeing an opportunity that's in front of them with this transit.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
To influence in some way the devil. The devil, I've talked about before on TikTok, especially how the devil can represent contract holders or those who are using power to oppress others. So it's a missing an opportunity to really channel our energy towards making change in that regard. Which I would love for that Four of Cups to be flipped so that we are able to receive that and do something with it. But at least on my social channels, my social feed, I see a lot of defeatist energy right now where people are feeling defeated. And so I would say, what can you do to really plug yourself back into the world? Plug yourself back into your manifesting ability on this planet. And maybe that's why Mercury and Venus are kind of going on this extended conjunct aspect. Conjuncted?
Yeah.
Why we have Mercury and Venus conjunct for an extended period. There we go.
Right.
Is Mercury is the magician as well, who is the manifester. And so we have what are we manifesting? What are we creatively bringing into the world? From March 11th to April, 17th, something like that. I'm not sure on that date. Yeah, say 17th sounds right. But these two signs working together so that we may go inward to figure out what are we creating? What are we wanting to bring to the table to make change? What kind of world are we wanting to manifest? And it's also too, with those two planets going retrograde in Aries, it's very much giving like an underground. So what kind of community building things can you get involved with that's underground so that you can start planning protests, so that you can start getting your voice heard? Is kind of the energy that I'm getting. And then it's interesting too, because the cards I have after that are the sun and the world. And so that would be the sun, and the world is Saturn. And so the sun and Saturn, which I know that you're talking just now about an eclipse that might be happening.
Yep.
Or that is happening.
Yes.
So tell me more about the eclipse that is opposite Saturn.
It's the total lunar eclipse in Virgo will be opposite Saturn in Pisces. It's a very so I want to wrap up. I want to wrap up Venus, and then we'll kind of dive.
Okay,
dive
yeah,
into
for sure. But it was
literally
interesting that I drew those cards, and I think
literally
it's the next thing we're talking about.
Yeah, it's the sun will be conjunct Saturn, and the moon will be opposite it during that eclipse. So Saturn will be definitely this huge theme during that first lunar eclipse in Virgo. So I also wanted to mention, just kind of typical Venus stuff. Is
too quickly on Venus.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's okay. I guess just a couple things personally while Venus is retrograde. Venus can represent like luxury items and luxury purchases and stuff. So there's like, the sort of common or old school kind of advice during Venus retrograde is like, maybe chill on like plastic surgery during Venus retrograde. Maybe wait on getting a really permanent change done to your body or body modification. I might like just kind of chill on like a tattoo or something.
Yeah, let me cancel my tattoo appointment.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it might be fine, but I would just maybe wait to stay safe. People often kind of play with their appearance during Venus retrograde, which I think is totally fine. It's like I would just say nothing's too super permanent, So like, yeah, if you feel like dyeing your hair, cutting it off, whatever, like maybe dye it, maybe cut it off, and maybe be okay with like maybe when it's direct, you might be like, oh, I don't know if I like this, but it also could be like the best thing ever. But I would just those themes are definitely kind of play out during Venus retrograde. As far as like relationships, especially romantic relationships, I would try to hold off on making commitments during the retrograde time, especially because Venus technically will be struggling a little bit on the relating and connecting piece that Venus does, because it will be in Aries. So I'd maybe if you're dating someone and you're like, let's make things official, I would just chill. I would just
agree.
Yeah. And if they're really the person for you, then they'll wait. That's all I'm saying.
I was thinking too, it was giving like going back to like an ex from like a younger age, or like wanting to like contact somebody in that way.
Yeah. And honestly, maybe you should contact and maybe find out that they're actually not the person for you officially. You know what I mean? But
right? Yeah.
It's just like the really committed stuff. I would just chill. And because this is a time when like certain things from the past can kind of influence it, and it will really depend where Venus, where Aries is in your chart, and where Venus and what houses or life areas Venus does rule for you as well. And folks who are like Taurus or Libra heavy in their chart are going to be feeling Venus a lot more, or let's say that Venus is your Time Lord this year if you're in a Venus reflection year. Anything else? But I would say like kind of be aware of maybe where Venus is a little dissatisfied, and maybe start experimenting and making some changes, or just kind of being aware of those things. And don't be afraid of the messiness. But I would say hold off on your tattoo. So,
Okay.
All right, cool. Okay, let's talk about this eclipse. So let me just kind of give a little overview on eclipses first, then we'll talk about what your thoughts and then my thoughts are. So this is a total lunar eclipse. So this is a really big eclipse. This is a full moon, essentially.
What day is it on?
This is a total lunar eclipse at 23 degrees of Virgo on March 14th. Which day is the Ides of March? Is it the 14th or the 15th?
15th.
Okay. So, someone, if anyone in the comments asks, like, is that astrologically significant? No. Moving on. It just happens to be the same day. Maybe it is. I don't know. So, so lunar eclipse is essentially a big full moon. This is the first eclipse in the Pisces Virgo eclipse series. We started this eclipse series this fall with a eclipse in Pisces. So really this year, the Virgo Pisces houses of our charts are really going to see a lot of action, especially because the North and South node, which is where eclipses happens, which denote like beginnings, endings, increases, decreases, and kind of the sort of faded feeling that happens during eclipses are due to the nodes. So the part of your chart that contains Virgo also has the South node going through it right now. So there is a sense of letting go of things, of decrease, of endings, and kind of maybe like releasing maybe toxicity as maybe kind of one element of this eclipse because it is on this South node. I also would say it also might be a little bit more of a draining kind of feeling because it is on the South Node, especially because it is connected to Saturn. But generally, these feelings of endings, but I would also say beginnings, can come in during during eclipses too. And just noticing major endings, major beginnings, major kind of parts of your story beginning to kind of fluctuate and change during eclipse time. And also, eclipses kind of speed everything up as well. There's like time feels weird when shit is eclipsy. I would also want to say you want to pay attention to what is going on in your life, not hyperfixating, but just kind of being generally aware of what is going on in your life about a week and a half prior to an eclipse, a week and a half after, maybe up to 2 weeks, because these events that are eclipse related can pop up during this time. So I would also so completions, culminations, a focus on endings could also be illuminations or spotlighting something in your life, something coming to a head, or some sort of new awareness happening in your life that will be connected to the life area that Virgo and Pisces rules for you, especially focused on Virgo. So and I'll get into the nitty gritty astrology of that in a minute, but this eclipse, like I mentioned before, and I'll hand this off to you, is opposite the planet Saturn, the planet that is about restrictions, delays, obstacles, a feeling of maybe heaviness, and really kind of like this is giving stark reality check kind of energy. And again, you could personally benefit from this energy. You could do really well with this energy, but this is kind of a heavy energy. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, this one is intense. Not only do you have that Saturn aspect, but it also looks like you have an exact sextile with Uranus. So it's giving kind of like mixed energy. One of the words that's coming to mind for me is edit. And so like it just feels like, what can you edit out that is no longer like serving you? And this is kind of making me think about how I've been editing as a form of protest. This year has been very politically charged for me for obvious reasons. And so I've been canceling like contracts again. So I think of Saturn, I kind of think of contracts as well. And so like editing out like, okay, no more Netflix. I don't really use it anyway. Like no more Amazon Prime. Like I can make it work without that kind of junk. Like really taking my power back and editing back down. Like, and I mean, it could be because Pisces is my third house. And so maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
Like connections and things like that. And so just kind of like taking my money back, especially with like Venus being retrograde during this time. Like is Mercury retrograde? Not yet.
Mercury is going retrograde essentially on the eclipse, and Mercury is actually in charge of the eclipse because it is in Virgo, because Mercury rules Virgo. So your editing comment is very apt because Virgo literally is the editor, especially Mercury going retrograde on the eclipse. You know, those very kind of stark themes of like reviewing, going back and looking over things. I will say there is an element of hardship, I feel like, on this eclipse, or a feeling of just like society encountering obstacles. I also wonder too, because it is Virgo, if public health is more of a concern at this time, or something to take seriously, because Virgo is a sign that is very connected to health and public health. Or laborers and workers as well. But I think public health, I would really pay attention to headlines around, I don't want this to be true, but around like, because I mean, bird flu is something that's kind of floating around.
I was kind of thinking that. One of the things, one of the cards that I drew was the Nine of Pentacles inverted, which can be kind of like a health scare or like a financial scare of some kind. But especially because the Nine of Pentacles is ruled by Virgo. It's in that last triad of the suit of Pentacles. And on top of that, I had the King of Swords inverted, which is very imagery. It's very, think like, sometimes when I think of the King of Swords, I think of like sinuses because it's the head. That may or may not make sense to people, but it makes sense to me. And so when you said that, after looking at these cards, I'm like, oh snap! Like I kind of see that as well.
But I
not to fear or anything.
but I would just think precautions. starting now, like maybe considering things to reduce risk of any kind of infection in some sort of public area. That doesn't mean completely stay home, but maybe consider wearing a mask at the grocery store in like high traffic areas or something like that.
Yeah, that's smart.
Okay. Sorry. Anything. Oh, also Virgo is very communication oriented as well, or things involving technologies, communication technologies, how we talk to each other. So let's talk about this Mercury going retrograde on this eclipse. It's just because I've been like looking at these eclipses for months, like looking at clients' charts, like looking at the year ahead. Every time I get to this fucking eclipse series or this month, I'm like, okay, there's just like a lot of shit happening. I don't even delineate like the ruler of the So let's mention Mercury is going retrograde in Aries. It is also going retrograde at the degree of Aries, or near the degree of Aries where Venus went retrograde. So there's a lot happening in Aries around 8 to 10 degrees, where these planets are stationing, where we're having eclipses. So it feels like if you have planets like, 7 to like, it's maybe like 6 to 12 degrees of the cardinal signs.
Aries, me crying right now.
Oh, bitch. I'm so sorry. Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. It feels kind of like pivotal. These feels like a really maybe like important kind of few months. Where do you have those degrees?
Damn, my whole chart.
Is that your
Libra?
What's your
Sun, Mars, 9 degrees. Cancer, Jupiter, 9 degrees.
Okay.
Capricorn, my rising, my Neptune, my Saturn.
Okay, you know what?
I'm fine.
Sure.
It's fine.
Yeah. It is. Hey, again, doesn't have to be bad at all, but it does feel pivotal, and it feels like you're very much like, in the thick of it, basically. So Mercury retrograde, basic things. I would say Mercury retrograde in Aries. Mercury in Aries is, what did I say about it? Mercury in Aries, generally speaking, is a fast, brash, impulsive, just puts it out there Mercury. It's a very witty and inventive Mercury as well. And it going retrograde, it's kind of giving foot in mouth a little bit.
Yeah. For sure. The energy that I associate it with is like Mercury in Aries is like in his neurodivergent 8-year-old era. Like it's like you're just gonna get like unfiltered information. Like,
yes.
There is no thinking involved. Yeah. It's just blah blah blah, and it's out there.
It's kind of giving morning show hosts on like live television saying fuck, like, and can't bleep it out. And sort of what it's saying, like Cosby just saying pussy on like national TV or whatever. So, I would definitely try not to move too fast or make too many. Like it's kind of giving the necessity to think on the fly and move on the fly, but I would not necessarily be like, I'm gonna buy a house right now. I'm going to like, it's like, if you can help it, I really would try to wait on making these kind of big life altering decisions right now. But for some people, I think, you're going to have to, and life does go on. And it's not really that, and it's not really that Mercury retrograde is necessarily like this super bad thing. Like, I really don't think it is. It can make life really a little bit more annoying, more tech mishaps, people not kind of receiving information, or like missing an email or something. But I definitely feel like we're going to be really looking at the logistics, how do things work, communication oriented things in the Aries part of our chart as well. So again, my Aries is 6th house. I might be looking at my work routines. I might be looking at health routines, that kind of thing. And it just makes this eclipse feel I think this eclipse is just going to feel extra weird. It's like, what is happening? It's definitely a big yellow light in traffic where I'm like, I feel like I really need to stop and be cautious and kind of look around and really assess everything and try not to move too quickly, essentially. So
I don't know. I feel like for me too, it's in that same vein, read the terms and conditions. Like,
Very true. That is
be
very
very aware of like
yeah.
what you're signing, what you're getting into, the contracts that you're making.
Maybe the other thing I would mention too is this eclipse. It is most closely is most closely connected to Saturn, but it is also opposing Neptune, which is getting ready to move into Aries. So, with Neptune, extra focus on details because Neptune is mystery. It is like oneness, higher consciousness, and this connection to. I think it also can be helplessness as well when it's
Yeah, for
connected to Saturn
sure.
like that. Yeah,
Neptune is the hanged man in tarot. And
yeah,
so, in a lot of ways, the hanged man is helpless because he is bound by his foot. But at the
yes.
same time, like, it can also be a place of both like enlightenment and delusion. Like,
Yes.
it
Well,
carries
it's
both of
very
those energies. And that's actually making me think about a reading that I did at the election where it was the emperor and the hanged man. And so this whole time I've been wondering, like, what's going to happen in the world, in our political sphere, when Neptune finally makes that crossover to Aries.
yeah. It's yeah. I would say with this eclipse, it's for me it's a very Eight of Swords thing where
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're feeling like you're absolutely imprisoned, but you're actually not, essentially. Like,
Mm-hmm.
isn't that kind of Eight of Swords, with like
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah,
so
it's false entrapment.
yes. So that could potentially be a theme with that eclipse. So okay, so we talked about that. So Mercury goes retrograde the very next day, but is essentially retrograde right on that eclipse. And by the way, like the day or two around a planet stationing, it's really potent. It's feeling like extra, like, what the fuck? Extra
Mm-hmm.
retrograde, basically, because it's very much like the car kind of slamming on its brakes. So solar eclipse, 8 degrees of Aries, again, that 8 degree mark, on March 29th. Let me look at my chart. So let me give my little overview first. This is the very last. This is the last eclipse in the Aries Libra series that started spring 2023, but really picked up in earnest in October 2023. So the Aries and Libra parts of your chart have really kind of been going through a series of changes, beginning, endings. Actually, the Aries part of your chart, there might be a sense of more or beginnings and adding things in, sense of sort of fervor with the North Node being present in that part of your chart for so many months, which has moved to the Virgo PIsces part of your chart. A solar eclipse, there can certainly be an ending under an eclipse, but the solar eclipse does feel more like a sense of maybe things beginning, because this is technically also a new moon. So this solar eclipse in Aries feels like a solar eclipse or new moon, kind of with like a bang, essentially. And this eclipse is interesting to me because it is occurring at the degrees where Venus and Mercury stationed retrograde. So
Right.
it's sort of like there is news connected to these sort of ongoing themes of Mercury and Venus going retrograde here. Maybe some sort of beginning, but maybe feels like it's maybe like a little bit delayed or something under this energy as well. Also, because it's in Aries, we want to look to the planet Mars and see what the planet Mars is doing. And Mars has gone direct in Cancer at the time of the solar eclipse. So Mars in Cancer, we've been on a journey with her. And Mars in Cancer is a cardinal sign. So it does, tend to initiate things or begin things. But Mars in Cancer is often sort of doing it in a way that's kind of sidestepping a little bit. It's sort of a little crab walk. And Mars in Cancer can indicate a time when our energy and motivation is not always there. It can kind of go up and down. So it feels like a beginning of, okay, let's get started or let's get to work slowly, because it is Mars in Cancer. The other thing I wanted to mention is, and this is kind of a little bit unrelated to this eclipse, is Venus at this time has moved into Pisces, and she's conjunct Neptune in the North Node. So there is like a separate parallel storyline going on of very dreamy, cosmic love, heightened artistic and aesthetic senses sort of happening here. And I would also sort of say like there's the eclipse, but also at the same time, Venus is also maybe dealing with relationship stuff that feels really good at the moment, but later maybe when she comes out of her sort of, intoxicated state, she might realize that, oh, it might actually be good for me long term. So that's the eclipse in Aries. So what are you thinking about it?
Super distracted by the fact that this eclipse is happening on the 9th degree of Aries, so that aspects my entire chart. So that aside, it's just... Hold on, give me a second. I'm still forming my thoughts on this. There's a lot happening. And
it's just, it's a lot happening. I will say it is a finale to the Aries Libra eclipses in your chart. So there is that kind of storyline, but I would kind of be looking at the eclipse plus one thing. Okay, last thing, my last thought. Mars in Cancer is directly square Chiron in Aries during that eclipse. That's a major energy. Chiron is the wounded healer, and Mars and Cancer squaring that. There's something that hurts with this eclipse. There's something that stings. It's giving the feeling of cauterizing a wound in order for it to heal, like burning off like scar tissue. So this is something, on a collective level that we are sort of dealing with, like something hurts, something stings, something is hurting the heart in order for us to heal. Also, Chiron does have to do with health, I will say too. So there is some sort of action taking, there's some sort of maybe event, maybe having to do with health, kind of happening too. So, Mars is also trining planet Saturn, which is an easier aspect, but still it's sort of like using one's resources effectively or using limited resources effectively. Like there is a flow there, but it's sort of saying like, look, we only have this much to last us through this year or through winter. And let's sort of be careful in how we use our resources and how we use our energy. At the same time, there is maybe some sort of freedom through that because it is sextile Uranus. But I definitely, it's not giving like, let's go, let's charge ahead. We have everything that we need. It's sort of being mindful. It's being mindful of maybe like limited resources and also this sort of ongoing intense healing process. So
for me, it's just giving major event. Something is happening on or near this day. I don't want to be like too predictive and be wrong, but it does feel incredibly significant, especially too with like Aries ruling the head. I don't know. There's some things that are coming to mind that I'm not sure, but it's kind of giving that energy that we had during the last eclipse season.
Oh, okay. You'll have to specify later. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but
gotcha. Yeah.
Any personal guidance for people?
Yeah, what kind of advice do we have here? So there's an energy in the tarot that's talking about it's possible to maintain a celebratory mindset during this time. And so how can you utilize these abrupt changing energies around March 29th to get to know yourself more, to understand on a deeper level, like who you are and what you're fighting for. Yeah. Like what is the story that you're telling? And not to forget that you hold the sword of your life. Like you are in control of when you put down the sword, you are in control of when you pick up the sword. So not to limit yourself around this time in any way, and just to, for whatever reason, I'm getting the image of like a snake shedding its skin. and to just like fully grow and evolve during this time. Evolution, I feel like, is a big word that's coming up for me, especially in regards to like the heart. Yeah, it's almost like a shedding in that way. But
Yeah, especially
just because there's so much going on, I don't know. It's a hard energy to deal with because it's like multiple things happening at once.
Yeah. I will say it's gonna. I will say a solar eclipse in Aries too. There's like, it's an energy that sort of connects you to your individual will, your individual drive. Setting your personal goals, picking up your personal battles, and having courage. It's definitely something that would kind of be coming through with this eclipse. So, okay.
And you know what, too? It's a week after spring equinox. So it's really the first new moon of the year.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. No, you're very correct in that. Yeah.
So it's interesting to see this and kind of that shedding imagery that I was getting, that kind of, what is your story? I think that something that pops up for me during this is that like our heroes throughout history were just people. And so like to kind of remind yourself that you have the ability to make change because you are also just a person, like
yeah.
We can't sanctify these people in history and not sanctify ourselves at the same time because you also have that potential. It's really what this eclipse is giving me.
Yeah, and Aries is very much like the hero's story anyway, or like
100%
the hero's journey. So, okay, I have to pee, and then we'll talk about Neptune and Aries. So let's do that. Give me 1 second.
When Neptune?
Okay, so Neptune is going to be in Aries. So the end of the month, Neptune enters Aries. Neptune, the planet of idealism, oneness, higher consciousness, but also delusion, illusion, vagueness, and obscurity. Leaves Pisces, where it has been. I think I saw an astrologer I actually really on TikTok, Neptune's been fucking up one part of your chart for 14 years, and it's going to go into another. So, this will be, it's just definitely interesting on a collective level. You may not feel like necessarily this personally. I do think it's interesting that like astrology and tarot and like new agey things have exploded during Neptune and Pisces, like during the past 14 years, like crazy. And, more of like the rise of like the guru, the spiritual teacher, the spiritual healers, but also exposing the abuses that can come with that as well, and like mass delusion and conspiracy. I also think, like QAnon, that whole thing like rose during Neptune and Pisces as well. So Neptune in Aries for me, I think it'll be because Neptune can like romanticize things. So I definitely wonder about like fighting, battles, resisting war. Yeah, being conscripted for the military. Like, you're going to be a hero if you sign up to do this. I think we'll all be very much more kind of elevated in the public consciousness, which I think it'll be interesting kind of after this date, because there's so much, because Saturn will go into Aries too later this year. It does make me wonder if like that feeling of helplessness that we're kind of experiencing right now, like why won't anyone do anything? It kind of almost feels like it feels like more individuals will be taking sort of action. And sort of romanticized for it, essentially.
Yeah, I feel like because Neptune has been at the last 2 degrees of Pisces, of course, it's been strengthened by that. And it's like that big, like, I need a hero energy.
Yeah.
And then I think that when Neptune goes into Aries, it's like, oh, like, we are the hero. Like, and then we have to start taking actions. It's a reality check. I feel like a lot of people, speaking of your mention of the Neptune affecting the spiritual world, like I feel like a lot of people are going to end up falling off by being like shown as like frauds, or like maybe some better people like are entering the scene. I'm not sure, but something is going to change there.
The TikTok astrologers who insist that every new moon will change your life are going to fall off so hard. Wait. Cannot wait. Only the real ones left. It's fine, you know?
Yeah. I think it's giving that. I think it's also giving the activation of the spiritual warrior archetype.
Yeah,
and so
totally.
Like,
oh my gosh.
What are you fighting for on a soul level? Like, why did you incarnate? Kind of getting back to the roots of like soul purpose, soul mission.
I think that's a really good point. And so wonder if we're just going to be seeing some new, I don't know, not archetypes, but new spiritual frameworks emerge that have not really been seen before, that are going to be much more like on an individual level basis. And like, you know, what actions are you taking to, instead of waiting for some planet to hit some point in your chart that will create change in your life, it's like, well, what are you doing to make that happen? And also, you know, like manifestation, you know, like that whole concept, while I do think very much it is a thing, obviously, like people's experiences with interacting with that kind of popular spiritual narrative that is largely like, what is the word? I'm like, prosperity gospel for a lot of people. Does that make sense? I just wonder, that's all going to change. Like a lot of it's going to change. And, you know, a new generation, I think, of spiritual teachers are going to start kind of rising, I think, during this time period. And I will mention too, Neptune is going to be in Aries for 14 years. It's going to, it will retrograde back to finish up in Pisces late October. But then, so it's going to be in Aries most of this year, and then for good, quote unquote, by January 27th, be in Aries until 2039. And so definitely, you know, the Aries part of your birth chart, we're going to be looking at like, you know, like, let's say for me, again, I'll just use myself as an example, 6th house. So I'm thinking, how can I spiritualize my work? How can I bring some sense of the divine and divinity into that? How can I, but also might make work things a little bit more confusing. Like, what are my motives? Just like, what things do I want to accomplish? And also for me, because it's 6th house, it's also health. So just really paying attention to health, because that can kind of confuse things a little bit too. So, but it'll be nice to have it in my 5th house anymore.
That's funny. With your chart, I was thinking like, how do you enjoy like the runner's high, or like Aries for me is very much like gymnasium.
Yeah, totally.
So I could totally see that.
Yeah. Did you have any cards on Neptune and Aries or any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I've essentially worked that into the conversation about like life purpose, life meaning. It can be an initiation of like soul activation.
Yeah.
Because I also associate I can say this on YouTube. So I associate Aries with blood. And so like, especially like in the physical body.
So blood magic?
Yeah, no. No, I feel like DNA activation, like really connecting with that, especially because Neptune is going to be on that threshold of Pisces and Aries for a minute. This could be like a golden opportunity for you to start an ancestral practice, or really get involved with things like DNA activation, like, but not the total like woo-woo version of it, the more grounded version of it, which is something I actually like to help people with. So it's my second plug for myself.
I also think a romanticization or elevation of the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps survivor kind of thing, like making do with the supplies I have, and like, if surviving on a desert island is very Neptune and Aries, like I'm going to build a fire and like hunt for myself and feed myself, like connecting to your very primal kind of roots is sort of what I kind of feel with that too. So I wonder if there's going to be more like survivor sort of stories and like warrior stories, like in the pop cultural landscape or the, you know, collective landscape too.
I mean, Buffy's coming back, right? So
Honestly, oh, by the way, anyone who's still listening at this point, Buffy the Vampire Slayer coming back is a very Venus retrograde and Aries thing. I talked about that on TikTok. That's crazy. So, Sarah Michelle Gellar's rise, I am so looking forward to, because she has Venus and Aries retrograde in her chart right at the degree that it is stationing this year. Venus being, planet of women, and Aries, planet of the warrior. Come on, Slayer. So.
Oh, that reminds me too. Two gay boys loving Venus. Surprise, surprise.
Yes, Venus. Come on, girl. Slay.
No, so Gaga's new song, the Lady in Red archetype is coming out.
Oh my God, that's crazy
and so
too.
That is Venus in Aries, and I think Gaga
Yeah.
actually is a Venus in Aries too.
Yeah, she is. Yes,
and
Sun and Venus in Aries.
That's another reason I was thinking about the female protests. It needs to happen.
Yeah.
Imagine just a group of women wearing Handmaid's Tales, red gowns, in protest.
I hope it's not Handmaid's Tale gowns. I hope it's like Handmaid's Tale, but it slays. Come on.
Crop top?
Yes, totally. Yes.
With the crop?
Yes. So, okay. So let's go and wrap this up. So any last thoughts before we tell you people how they can find you?
Fight for our country.
Yeah.
But that's the stand that I'm on right now.
Yes.
Last thoughts. It's intense, but promising.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's very kind of, I think with this much Aries focus too, it's initiating things and let's go. When you're done with whatever, are you pulling a card? When you're done with that,
I was going to.
When you're done with that, let people know where they can find you, what you're working on, and kind of your different offerings.
Yeah. So speaking of, sorry, pause, rewind.
No, you're good.
So you can find me. It's Aster Soluna on basically any platform. I'm on Blue Sky. That's ASTERSOLUNA. I'm on TikTok, Instagram. My card is the best way to reach me. I do coaching. I do tarot readings, Reiki. One of the things that I am actually going to launch, so what am I doing this year? I was thinking about how beautiful of an opportunity. I was thinking of how beautiful of an opportunity it is right now for people to be initiated into something. And so that Neptune and Aries at the end of the month, I was thinking about launching my year in a day. And so for those of you who don't know, in traditional pagan practice, it is very common for someone to go a year in a day with a mentor. And so diving deep into spell casting, what is witchcraft, both on a magical level and a physical mundane level. So I definitely want to launch that program. However, I would need students to do that. So that's kind of where I'm wanting to steer the rest of my year. But of course I am available for any kind of tarot reading if you're trying to figure out what is the role that you can play, what kind of talents do you have to offer the collective right now? Those are kind of the places that I want to take my reading, because I feel like tarot can be used for empowerment, and I want to be one of the leading people in that right now.
Perfect. And you do local classes and events where you're at as well.
Yeah, so I actually am in the DMV
area.
Yeah, I'm in the DMV, so definitely give me a follow if you do live in Maryland, Virginia, DC. I host all kinds of events with amazing partners and friends that I have. So just finished a sound bath this last weekend. I'm doing a cord cutting this weekend, starting a monthly tarot club. So that's my contribution towards establishing community. That tarot club is donation based. So don't let the money frighten you from going. That now is the time that if you have something that you can teach, if you have something that you can give to the community, start those clubs, get people within your circle, because going forward, especially for the rest of this year, we're really going to need to rely on our communities.
Yes. Okay, awesome. And you can find you can find asterisks or Aster's links in the comments on YouTube, in the little info section, or on the show notes. If you listen to the audio feed, you can find me at dogstar.oracle.com, DOG, just like it sounds, Dogstar Oracle, DOGSTAR.com, Dogstar Oracle, on all social media platforms. I send out, so you can look for me there, and I'll be teaching astrology later this year, some intuitive development classes as well. So yeah. So okay, cool. So that being said, I don't know if you had like a final. I just want to make sure we got that done first. Any I know you were maybe playing a card, but if not, that's fine. But I don't know if you had like any last message for us.
It's a card that's already been featured. It's the Nine of Pentacles inverted. So like be mindful of what's trying to be taken away from you right now and be aware of the actions that you can take to prevent that.
Awesome.
The Slayers are awakening.
The Slayers, I know.
Season 7, bitches.
It is season 7. So awesome. Well, thanks for joining me. I think we might make this a regular thing, possibly. So, and you can find me here on YouTube or on the podcast. So make sure that you're subscribed, that you turn on the notifications, that you like the video. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of the video. If you're a hater, go away. I actually don't want to know, but if you enjoyed it, please let me know. So, thanks again for being here. And I hope everyone has, a magical month. Even with all the astrology happening. So thanks, everybody.
Bye.